What's a mook?
A mook? What's a mook?
I don't know.
What's a mook?
So here's actually an interesting thing to touch upon in terms of trying to figure out what is it that makes a movie iconic versus not.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I tend to focus on music a lot. A lot of these things tend to have some sort of a memorable musical theme. Like, okay, so if you think about Psycho, everybody knows that music, those strings, those high pitched strings and stuff. The Halloween theme. I'm trying to think of what it would be for Friday the 13th. It's the shh, shh, shh.
If you want,
like things like that.
If you want to know, this is a really easy way to know the Friday the 13th sound. It goes back to the first movie where at the end with Mrs. Voorhees, when she's kind of being, I guess, kind of, she's sort of like being possessed by her son, Jason, or at least she feels she is. And she kind of like takes on his voice.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
And what he's constantly saying near the end of the movie when she's chasing the last girl is "kill her, Mommy."
Mm-hmm.
So what the composer did was he took the first two syllables of "kill" and "mom," which is why it goes
Oh,
so there's a little trivia bit there, but yeah, that's what I always think of as the sort of the Friday the 13th sound, which
yeah.
In the later movies it kind of did just kind of get bastardized into just like they just didn't know kind of what to do with it. But that was the origin of it, was what they had all the way back from the first movie. So this is the only Friday the 13th movie that I have on my list, and it's not the first one. I put down Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which is part 4. I don't know if you've seen...
I have seen that one.
Oh, you have? Oh, okay.
And it is funny that you put a Friday the 13th movie that was not the first one either, because I also have one at some point on my list that is not the first one, too.
I'm glad to hear it's not the first one. Nothing against the first one. It's just, yeah. If you've seen them all, guys, I think we can agree the first one's definitely not the best one.
Yeah.
But I guess let me try and explain maybe why number 4 is just maybe my overall favorite of the franchise. So it brought back Tom Savini, the famous effects artist who did the first movie. And from what I know is the real only reason that they brought him back was that they promised him that would be his opportunity to kill off Jason for good. And we all know how that went, 6 or 7 movies later with more Jason. But the effects are particularly, I thought, good in this one. I like the cast in this one. You've got a young Corey Feldman in the movie. You've also got Crispin Glover.
I forgot Corey Feldman was in there.
Yeah, no, he plays Tommy Jarvis, who's one of the few reoccurring characters in the Friday the 13th franchise. It's just, for me, it's kind of just got a lot of the sort of rewatchability. It's kind of right in the middle of the franchise when they were really kind of just starting to kind of really understand how to use Jason properly.
Right, right.
A lot of the Friday the 13th are summer camp movies, and this one isn't. This one's more just kind of there's a family in kind of a cabin in the woods, and then across from them there's a cabin of teenagers that show up. But I don't know, for some reason, because of that, I feel like you kind of get to know these characters a little bit more than you do in some of the other Friday the 13th movies. And I don't know, the acting seems a little bit better.
Hey, Ted, where the hell's Corkscrew?
I don't think the writing's really any particularly better. The story's not all that different from the other ones, but just a lot of things just kind of came together on this one that worked.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Yeah, as we go through your list, I'm curious to know what your one, which one yours is going to be.
It is funny because I was wrestling with this one. I was considering putting part 4 on there as well, the final chapter.
How many Friday the 13th have you seen altogether?
I think I've seen the first 5 or 6.
Okay.
And then there's a bunch that I haven't seen. I haven't seen Jason Goes to.
I mean, 7. I would say 7 is definitely worth watching, and maybe watch 8 just to complete the 80s part of the franchise. But after 8, it gets kind of rough.
I feel like the 80s movies are worth watching, and maybe it's just because I love 80s movies, and so it kind of has that 80s magic that's in there. But again, I like the first two Friday the 13th movies. They're not my favorite, largely because they're missing the iconography. But I still feel like that whole decade, because the first one came out in 1980.
Yep.
Pretty sure. All those 80s movies are worth watching to me because, I don't know, I just love the 80s, man.
Yeah, no,
it's that
and
80s vibe.
unlike a lot of the other slasher franchises, there's like and this is what some people could criticize about the Jason movies, is that they're not really all that different from each other. But that's actually kind of what I like about them, is like they're very consistent.
Yeah. Well, especially for that decade, though, too, right? Because afterward, then maybe you start to they started to change a little bit in terms of the style or the...
the last 80s one, which is Jason Goes to Manhattan, that's kind of when they jumped the shark. It still is... I kind of still enjoy it compared to a lot of the ones that came after it.
Yeah.
But because number 8, that's the first time where they kind of really do take him away from the campgrounds. Like, he's no longer in the woods. He's on a boat. And I think they filmed it in Vancouver. So,
really?
Vancouver, it's the Vancouver curse. We ruined it.
So it was not a good movie.
No, I used to love it a lot as a kid, and I didn't realize that it was like one of the most hated ones in the series. And then as I got older, I realized I was like, no, this really is terrible. But there was something
because the concept of Jason going to Manhattan actually sounds like a fun concept to me.
Well, that's the thing, is I think a lot of people assume that he would be in Manhattan within the first 20 minutes of the movie. It takes like over an hour before he gets to Manhattan. Like, the movie is on a cruise ship, and that's what the movie is. And by the time he does get to Manhattan, they don't even really do a whole lot with that. Again, funny enough, like, that's when you really start seeing a lot of the Vancouver shots, is when he's in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Or sorry, when he's supposed to be in New York.
That's what it was. Friday the 13th part. Do you know which one it's going to be?
So you said you've seen the first 6.
I think so, yeah.
I'm going to say it's number 6.
No, it's number 3.
Is it Oh, hey!
Part 3. So that's the first one where you get the iconic Jason character showing up with the goalie mask and stuff. And I just think it's got some really good sequences, but it's also kind of rooted in the first 2 strongly enough. Like, it's basically what those movies are, but with the iconic Jason character, basically.
Yeah, I love the soundtrack, because like all the pretty much every other Jason movie has the classic kind of just violin orchestrated theme, but number 3 they decided to go disco. If you remember, like, the opening credits, it's like Friday the 13th. It's Friday the 13th to disco music.
Oh, okay.
Not through the rest of the movie. You don't hear it for the rest of the movie, but it's just kind of like, it kind of is the way it reveals, like, 'cause the credits kind of come in 3D.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, and it's just kind of being like, this ain't your typical Friday the 13th. We're going 3D.
Right. Okay.
I'm actually really glad you, I'm glad that I said 4, and I'm glad you said 3, because the funny thing is that I've always said 4 is the best, unless you're watching number 3 in 3D, in which case it might be the best one, because I've actually, I got to see Friday the 13th in theaters in 3D, and I don't know, some people kind of rip on the 3D-ness of that movie, because usually you're watching it in 2D and you're noticing there's just tons and tons of kind of weird things happening that makes sense if you were watching it in 3D, but in 2D there's just kind of a lot of random things. But with that being said, that's why I think it's a really good 3D movie, because like almost every other scene, they're not just showing you something in 3D, like they're actually trying to think of as many ways to exactly. Yeah. And I don't know, I just remembered like watching it in 3D, it just looked like a beautiful movie. And I guess it was just because it was in 3D, but just really basic shots that you take for granted. When it's in 3D, it just made it seem like, I don't know, just like this artistic Jason movie. It was hard to describe, but...
well, and that's kind of my impression of it too. And it's... I think it is a pretty good looking movie altogether. That's where sort of the production value is upped a little from the first 2, because the first 2 are kind of on the same level, in that they're like these low budget.
Well, they're
both,
both,
at least the first
they're both
summer.
The first 2 are both summer. Like, that's kind of how I kind of sometimes categorize. There's different ways I can categorize the Jason movies, but one way is you can also be like, there's the summer camp ones, and there's the kind of more like farmhouse ones. And Friday the 13th 3D was the first like farmhouse one. I don't know. Number 4 is also a farmhouse. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe you and me, maybe we like the farmhouses more than the campgrounds. They get back to the campgrounds in number 6. And I think that then they kind of stay away from it again for a little while. But it's weird. Yeah, we always kind of think of Jason and Camp Crystal Lake, but really a lot of those movies it's just kind of like a rural place in the middle of in the woods, and him just kind of like going after those people. It's a lot of fun. It's the first iconic one where he gets the mask. It's I don't know if anyone has a chance to ever see it in 3D. I'd say do it up, because it's definitely, I think, one of the better sort of 3D movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's very I'm wondering where you would like get to see that.
Well, this was when I was in Toronto. It was just one of like the festival theaters, and it was in the month of October. In fact, I might have even seen it on Halloween night, or maybe October 30th or something. But it was really close to Halloween.